right now. So if you're not following one, make sure you follow and subscribe to both of them. But at any rate, we got a little bit to talk about this week. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here with Jamarl Thomas, running on both of our channels. And, you know, here's the deal. I think I'm hearing myself. Am I on in your, or do you have your sound on for yours also?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
okay, because I'm here. If you can get that sound, I can hear myself on your channel. Like a little echo. You know what I mean? I
see. There we are. Let me kill that. My bad.
All right, here we go. All right, let's roll. Still there? Yeah, I can still hear it. I can hear it. You don't have to have your channel on, you know. You can just cut yours off. It'll still push it.
Maybe I think it's this. Hold on, let me kill it. Let me kill these. And let me kill this one. You still here?
Okay. No, gone. Okay, perfect. All right, let's go. So, you know what? Here's what's interesting about this week. Trump didn't even go to Europe. He sent his henchmen, he sent his minions, right? And man, you know, they're just like, look, we're out, man. We're tired of this thing. If you want it, you're going to have to pay for it. We can't stand you. You know, what's his name? JD Vance went there, and a lot of people might not have saw Vance. I watched his speech, and he's like, Romania, you just overthrew an election. What do you think? The Russians bought a couple of somebody had a couple of online posts, and you know, your democracy was that weak. I mean, he just let them have it from one end to the other. I may not agree with everything he said, but for the most part, he slammed them for censorship. He slammed them for like not respecting their people and you know, basic arrogance. I mean, Trump's people just went to Europe and just like grabbed them by the collar like this. Bat, 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 bat. And they just were like, and they didn't even know what to do. Your thought?
He took him to a wood chipper. Yeah, he took him to the wood chipper. I mean, I've never look, man, people always talk about this notion of leadership. If this is not leadership, I don't know what it is. I mean, let's be very clear. They're talking about a new norm in the way that the United States engages with Europe. And that new norm is Europe is going to deal with its own issues more than the US. We're going to end this war in Ukraine. We are even, and he went further than that, by the way, when he pointed out he wants to sit down with trilateral talks with Putin and Xi Jinping in order to effectively work out world peace. That is mind-blowing. Like, think back for the moment with Joe Biden saying we're with you for as long as it takes. Think back to Kamala Harris going after JD Vance and JD Vance has to say in a debate, censorship, or what did he say? Diplomacy is not a dirty word. He had to tell that to Tim Walz. Like, it seems, and I could be wrong on this. And look, there's going to be plenty of videos where I'm putting a knife in Trump for something that he did, especially domestically. But he seems to be taking a new norm in regards to international affairs with the U.S. and how we relate to the rest of the world, whether that's China, whether that's Russia, whether that's North Korea, wherever that is, and simultaneously pointing out to Europe that your issue is internal. Like when you are killing an election by Carl Gogetsku because of TikTok ads, okay, there's something wrong with your country. It's nonsense. If you are trying to overthrow the Georgian government because you don't like the Georgian Dream Party being in the lead. Okay, well, again, you know, this notion that you are overthrowing governments that you don't like internally to Europe and calling it liberalism is outrageous. And so Vance going there and effectively making that point brimmingly clear is pretty amazing. That's not something Joe Biden would have done. And I'll close it on this. Liberals in Europe is okay with that nonsense. But it's so dishonest. It's like Carl Gogetsku was obviously going to win that election. The Romanian court, whatever is prodding or pushing the Romanian court, they come in and decide to kill that election for TikTok videos that ended up being part of a liberal party in Romania that put out those videos and was giving money to those videos. USA has been dropping money out of helicopters, going after Romania, Georgia, Hungary, meaning governments that don't toe the line on the issue of war, they have decided to go after. Like, that's outrageous. And you get somebody like Trump coming in and just outing all of it. And I think the wild part, and I want to get your take on it, they knew what USA was doing. They knew what National Endowment for Democracy was doing. It is fascinating to me that it now has been aired with Republicans screaming to the rafters. They're overthrowing governments with this money. This is not aid. This is money that they're using to overthrow governments. That's astonishing. I find all of this to be astonishing, frankly.
What's interesting about it is this too, and there's a, I don't want to use the word hypocrisy. I don't even know what the word is. I don't even know if there's a word for it, but the Biden and the neocons were the world leaders of this totalitarian version of liberalism, right?
Yes.
Oh, we're liberals. And they would say democracy, but they're overthrowing governments. They would say values, but they were starting wars and doing terrible and genocide and all kind of terrible things. But they would mouth the words of goodness and kindness, this really nasty fascist version of liberalism, right? It was like, take us to the brink of nuclear war and just lie. The Russians did that. And we were like reporting like, no, they didn't. What are you talking about? The Russians are going to come across the border and attack. And we're like, we were on Sputnik. We got thrown off the air for telling the truth. And we're like, the evidence does not point to what you're saying. And instead of like looking at the evidence, they were like, we got to shut you up. You're a little mouthy. You're a little too mouthy there telling the truth, right? But you see what I'm getting at? It was like these Europeans were like, we're following the United States, but they weren't really following the United States. They were following these fascist, totalitarianist, liberally kind of neocons. They were following that. And even that party, now that you really look at it, that wasn't the United States. That was this really weird, terrible ideology that happened to be in power at the United States at a particular time and got ejected from power. And since the Europeans aligned with those people, they probably intervened in all kind of European, well, we know they did, intervened in all kind of European elections to keep all of that stuff going, right? And so they're like, we're going along with the United States. We're going along with the neocon ideology of the United States. So they aligned themselves and they locked themselves. And then that ideology got ejected. And they're just sitting there like, but we were following you guys with that. And they're like, nah, it's new sheriff in town, brother. We ain't doing that no more. They're like, but the Russians are over there and they're going to do bad things. And Trump and his people are like, yeah, that bullcrap game doesn't play anymore. It's over. What you going to do? And now I keep seeing these things where like people in France, these so-called leaders in France and Germany are like, well, Ukraine's not going to accept that. And Europe, we're not going to accept. And I'm thinking, what are you going to do? They're going to call you bluff. You're not going to accept it. And what are you going to do? You're going to send troops? You don't have them. You're going to send weapons? You already sent them. They already got blown up. Your bluff is being called and you're still like, well, we're just not going to accept this. You're not going to dictate peace to us. And I'm like, your bluff's being called, bro. And you got nothing. You know what I mean?
The mighty Estonia.
You know what it's like? It's like some big, gigantic guy standing there, and you're like, draw a line, step over the line, and the guy steps over the line, and now you gotta like, what do I do now?
You know, I watched the Prime Minister of Estonia come out give some speech talking about, Ukraine cannot be imposed, or peace cannot be imposed upon Ukraine, and all this nonsense. It's like, you're literally from Estonia. Are you being serious right now? Like, do you understand, like the notion that of any country, that Estonia is out there dictating terms is laughable. It's like just laughable on its face. And I guess that's the wild part about this. They were so accustomed to working with Joe Biden, where they were just all aboard. Trump comes in, it's like, this is done. We're finished with this. Europe is going to attend to European matters. We are going to attend to the issues of the Pacific. And if we can, we will make a peace deal with Russia and China, meaning world peace. People need to, like, even, in fact, Hegseth, I was listening to his speech when I was driving back home because, that's what we do, right?
Mhm.
And in that speech, if you notice, Joe Biden often in Europe would say unprovoked war of aggression. They would say it over and over and over again. That was the way they talked about it.
Right.
Hegseth said Russia's war of aggression, meaning he left out unprovoked. That's not nothing. And I say that's not nothing because he's following in line with the way that Donald Trump is talking about this. As Trump pointed out, under no circumstances would the US have allowed NATO on the border in that way. Meaning, if we were Russia, we wouldn't have allowed that.
Right.
Meaning, they are removing this idea that this was unprovoked and accepting the premise it was provoked. They're accepting reality for what reality is. Something that the Biden administration never did, something that Europe never did, and something that Donald Trump is effectively setting in the context of negotiations. And I'll go further. He even pointed out this idea of we can't have this to resume again in 6 months. That can't happen, which is also the Russian argument, right? We don't want a freeze of this conflict. We're not looking to fight this war again. It was fought once. We want a new security architecture of Europe. And I get the sense that Trump bringing in China to that also fits within that line of how does the world look now that we're in a multipolar world? And whereas we might have had this kind of new world order after the Second World War, okay, something is different now. Russia is showing hard power, showing that they are a power. You have to deal with them on real terms. China is a power. You have to deal with them on real terms. Europe, nobody cares. Nobody cares.
It's like after the 4 years of the absolute lunatic neocons being in power, that and I like to use this word, whatever you want to call it, the ruling elite, or when I see all those rich people on the podium in front of the tech bros in the podium, I'm like, there's the that's the real what do you call it? The board of directors. The board of directors of the U.S. That's the real board of directors of this operation, right? But they've come to the reality conclusion. Look, we only got two options. We can accept the truth, or if we keep screwing around, we'll have a nuclear confrontation and we'll all die. That's the options. We could all see that. Oh, we're going to stand up to China for Taiwan, and we're going to surround them, and we're going to put missiles. That's going to end in a nuclear conflict. We're going to not let Russia do this. That's going to end. So they came to the conclusion, look, we got to accept reality or we're all going to die. And I'm a billionaire, man. I really don't want to die. Even more so than you, Yay. So the bottom line is, and they've come to that reality. And here's the reality. When it comes to, if we're honest, there's three actors in this play: Russia, China, and the US. The EU ain't an actor. Brazil, the rest, they're not. Russia, China, and the US are the three actors that make the decisions in the world. They are the three world powers. And what's interesting is the Russians have said, we ain't talking. As Galloway says, we're not going to talk to the monkey. We're talking to the organ grinder, right? We're not talking to the EU. We're not talking to Zelensky. That ain't happening. We're talking to the US. And it's funny because they were talking to Trump, and he's like, yeah, I talked to Putin, and we said this, it was great. And they're like, so are you going to talk to Zelensky? He's like, they're like, is Zelensky, is he bad? And he's like, well, they're probably going to have elections soon anyway.
Well, and that's the other thing, right? Zelensky's
Totally
been running. He's been running from those elections. Oh man, he's been running from those elections. And then there was a clip today that came out in British media where the guy says something to the effect of the bastards are going to do it above their heads, basically saying the U.S., Trump, and his team is going to do this regardless of what Zelensky wants, regardless of what the Brits wants, regardless of what Europe wants. This is going above their heads. Yeah, it is. Because we're the ones who are putting the most money into it. We're the ones that have the military power, hard power, in the way that Hegseth calls it. They don't. So they don't get a choice.
And look, and let's be honest about this. Like you said, I mean, you got to call a spade a spade. Trump's like, look, we're paying for all this crap. We're sick of it. We're paying for your follies. As they have on RT, they've got this article that says, Trump ejects from the Ukraine joyride, leaving the EU screaming in the back seat. Right. But
he is. He's dropping in their laps.
Look, we're paying for this crap. We're dealing with all this. You want us to provide the soldiers, the military, the planes, the this, the that. You want us to everything. We're going to send more missiles, more money, more everything. And well, there's nothing in it for us. I mean, the truth is this, from a transactional perspective, Trump's like telling the truth. There ain't nothing in it. And meanwhile, there's this big grift going on where you guys got all of these think tanks and websites and centers for strategic security crap like that all over the place. And we're paying for all of them, and we're sick and tired of it. No, you want to deal with Russia, and here's the problem they have. Here's what Trump's saying. This is important. He says, I think Russia should be back in the G8.
Yes, he did.
Never been out. Now, what does that mean? That means he's going to drop all the sanctions.
That's what it sounds like.
I mean, come on. Like. It's obvious. What does Trump want? One of the things he wants gas prices down a little bit. He's looking at the Russians and he's saying, hey, look, if I get a deal with the Russians, there's something in it for me. I can get a little bit I can get my inflation down. Maybe I can get dropped. If I can drop, they're hassling me about eggs or whatever. If I can drop prices 50, 75 cents a gallon, they'll be dancing in the street back home. I'll get a couple ticks up, I'll get another 4 or 5 points of. So he's thinking about how it helps it, and it's true. Why not? So here's the next problem that Europeans, let's say they say, well, we'll take it over then. Well, they don't have money. They don't have war material. And if the United States drops all the sanctions and we're doing business and we're now partners with Russia and Europe's going to be at war with them, really? That's not an option for them. And you know what Trump will do? He'll say, you know what, guys? He's going to bully them. If Trump gets a deal, Trump, if he gets a deal and Russia says, and he says, we got a great deal. Trump, it's a beautiful deal. It'll be a beautiful deal, right? It's going to be the best deal. Nobody's ever got a deal like this before. Everybody's telling me, Trump, nobody could get a deal like this, but we knew you could get a deal. It's just a beautiful deal. When he gets that, and if Europe's saying, we ain't going to go along with it, he's going to pull out the iron fist and he's going to say, oh, really? Well, gee, you guys going to have a lot of trouble with no LNG because you ain't getting none. None. And and the Russians ain't going to give you none. And I ain't going to give you none. Now, what are you going to do? He will put what's in a vice and force them to do it. In fact, they'll be better off to do it. In fact, let me add this. There's nothing Trump would love better than for the Europeans to say no, to give him the opportunity to pound them into dust and force them to do it. Oh, do him that favor. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you. 2 points. Let's be clear. The U.S. is getting something out of it. If you think about it, Europe has decided, they're going to forego natural gas that's cheap. So they've decided to pay 5 times more for energy, and they're paying it to us. The weapons that they're paying for, like the 200 billion, whatever they spent, the majority of that, like 70%, is coming to us. It's our weapons. We're the weapons manufacturers of the world. It's coming to us. If you think of the gas pipeline, Nord Stream, that was blown up, well, again, the U.S. hated that pipeline and for whatever wanted them to be able to be less dependent upon Russia, more dependent upon us, meaning those stupid idiots have decided on a policy that has damaged their own countries across Europe to our benefit and don't seem to quite get it. Now, Trump looks at us, though, and thinks, I say we're going to end the war, I'm going to end the war. And so there's a moral element, I think, added to this with Trump that I don't think people give him credit for, because they think of it in terms of, okay, well, we're not getting anything out of this, so why are we doing this? I think we are getting stuff out of it. I think Europe is taking it in the ass, frankly. I think what it boils down to, though, is Trump seems to not like this world where we are going to the brink of nuclear devastation. And if you're looking at this kind of pathway, that needs to be an off-ramp. And you weren't going to get one with Joe Biden. You weren't going to get one with Kamala Harris. Donald Trump looks at it as, I'm giving the off-ramp to nuclear war and nuclear oblivion. So good, God bless him on that one. The other thing, too, that you pointed out had to do with the oil thing. You're right. Europe is not in the best shape for oil. And from Donald Trump's point of view, getting rid of the sanctions to deal with another issue of BRICS. So part of the sanctions and part of the reason that Russia was pushing so hard for BRICS and for the single currency, meaning, let's be clear, an all-out assault on the dollar, which is what BRICS ultimately was trying to be. So he looks at this as, okay, well, BRICS on some level is on the table, or the attack on the dollar is some level on the table, but the only way for that attack on the dollar to go away is for me to stop the sanctions against Russia. So it's like, yeah, there's this element of him doing the gas thing and removing the sanctions. But he's incentivized to do it if he believes that an assault on the dollar is problematic. I don't think he just randomly said BRICS is over. I think he's out of his mind if he thinks that. For the time being, though, yeah, sure, we'll take the sanction relief. Sure, we don't need to go after the dollar. Everything is great, man. It's perfectly fine. Let's go after the dollar. Meaning there's no way around that boat. You've crossed that Rubicon. We have used sanctions to such a degree as a weapon that countries would be out of their minds if they didn't take actions to mitigate the power of the dollar in regards to their own economic or security apparatus. And so, yeah, they'll pacify him on some level, but all things being equal, BRICS is not going anywhere. But I do think that's part of the reason why he's talking about those sanctions against Russia.
Yeah, I think you're right. And here's, well, I'll put it like this. At least I think, because I think that as I call them, the board of directors of the U.S., I think they've decided that they're going to they're all in the treasury and all that stuff. They're going to restructure our monetary system. It's clear they're making some like major U-turns. Our monetary system is going to change. They're talking about issuing these silver dollars that are like not U.S. Treasury or something, instead of the reserve. But at any rate, here's my point. At least from their perspective, they're going to remove the urgency for these countries to get away from the dollar.
Yes.
And give themselves some time, buy some time. Because if they just keep, these countries could be plotting, and they could come out by next fall and have some alternative reserve, and we could, really get slammed, right?
Yep.
They're removing that urgency. They're saying, look, guys, we're going to be friendly with you. We're not attacking you. We're getting rid of the sanctions. Come back in. We're going to buy stuff. Look, you can buy all the oil you want with dollars. They'll probably say, well, how about we just buy the oil with dollars, and we'll promise you we'll never, and this little bit of money, 300 billion, take it all back. Not a problem. In dollars, in fact. We'll give it back to you in dollars. Make it a little easier to do. But you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It is, let's face it, it's smart. The Biden people were more like, we'll go blow up a country that is in BRICS. That was their move. Oh, you're in BRICS, good. We'll blow your country up, right? Where I think the group that's in power now is more like, let's kind of remove the urgency, and then we can try some other things. But we got to get this monkey off our back that everybody's de-dollarizing while we get our act together. So I think there is a method to this madness. It's not just helter-skelter and as chaotic as it looks. But I think, and you and I have a lot to consider here, I think that I would say maybe in weeks, you're going to see those sanctions start peeling back. If they can get anything, they're sitting down with Russia. And I think they're looking for an excuse, any excuse to start peeling the sanctions back. If they're like, hey, Russia, I got an idea. How about you stop throwing grenades? Oh, okay, grenades. There we go. Here, we'll give you 10 sanctions for that. We'll go to mortars. You know what I mean? They're looking for any excuse to start peeling back sanctions. They're like, please, Russia, give us anything so we can get off these sanctions, because I think they accurately view the sanctions as a danger to U.S. economics.
Yes, absolutely. 1,000% agree with you. And look, BRICS was not just a modest organization. The entire point of it was we need to attend to our own economic realities. But by definition, if you're attending to your own economic realities on some level, that means you're not attending to the U.S. economic realities, meaning we're trying to get off the dollar. We're trying to use something other than the main source of American power. To put this clearly, the U.S. spent $10 trillion over how many years in the Iraq war, Afghanistan war?
Yeah.
We just printed it. It just came out of, just the ether. It wasn't like it was backed by anything. It wasn't like there was anything holding it up. Military power, and for that matter, the idea that all of these countries fall in line on some level with America as a hegemon, was the thing that was backing it. So if you're Russia, if you're China, and you're like, okay, well, we have to actually deal with economic realities. America is over there just printing money, $10 trillion. What does that mean if you can dump $10 trillion into the military overnight because it's not backed by anything? Or what does it mean if you could dump $10 trillion in your economy overnight because it's not backed by anything? That is a serious weapon by itself. What does it mean when you can sanction countries? We want to take you off the SWIFT system. We're going to economically pass sanctions against you and your country. That is not a minor detail. That is a major detail. And that is one of those details that I really strongly believe that BRICS was trying to address. This is not
Mhm.
something we can tolerate.
Yeah.
So if you're Trump and you're like, you notice it, and Trump even said it on the campaign trail, they're coming after the dollar.
Mhm,
Okay,
mhm.
how do you stop them from coming after the dollar? Maybe you need to stop using the dollar as a weapon. So maybe these sanctions need to go away. Yeah, if you notice, he's passing tariffs, not sanctions.
Yes. Yep.
He's
And
passing
here's
tariffs.
the thing. This because I see people, you have too much faith in Trump. To me, this has nothing to do with Trump
I have no
per
faith in him.
se as the person. This has to do with, and as I said, the board of directors, very, very powerful, wealthy people are making decisions. And those decisions, some of them are going through Trump, some of them are aligned with Trump, some of them, hey, Trump, I helped you get in office. You go along with what I want, okay?
Yeah.
And in return, we will let you beat the hell out of the neocons who screwed you with Russiagate. You know what I mean?
Yep.
You want the Russiagate guys? You can have them all you want to, tear them up, tear them to shreds. And in return, we got some things we need you to do. You know how politics are with the ruling elite. But
Transaction.
I do think, I mean, this is a matter of being practical here. Look, you and I ain't president, and we can see it. BRICS was a problem for if you're a billionaire and you got $1 billion $1 bills, you don't want the value of $1 billion $1 bills
Right.
to depreciate, or now you only got half of it. You got the same number of bills, but they're only worth a half. It's simple. They can count, and they're looking out for themselves, right? I think that what we're seeing is a realization that these wars weren't helping them. And keep in mind, there's something else that I think is important that's been said that a lot of people miss.
Mhm.
So it was, they got 177 billion, right? And so then Zelensky says, well, actually, we only got 77 billion of it. We don't know where 100 is. But then when you looked at USAID, we found out that they've spent like 30 or 50 billion, right? So now we're up to 200 and some billion, right? Now Trump and his people are coming out and saying the real number is 100 billion, 300 billion. Have you seen that? There a couple of them saying 300 billion. Now here's what I think. In the same way, when Donald Trump was said, they're spying on me, they're spying on me, they're hacking our phones, and everybody said, oh, he's crazy, they're not spying on him. When Donald Trump says stuff like that, there's usually something to it. I believe it is 300, because you know how Biden and those people were. They were doing all kind of shady stuff with money.
Well, they said it was 270. From my understanding, they said it was like 270 billion. I just assumed it was 300 billion.
So it is 300. And think about this too. Okay, let's say we were making money off of Europe selling them LNG, right?
Mhm.
But we weren't making 370 billion. Even if we were making money off of them, we were still upside down, and that we were paying a lot more that we can make. But the problem that they have in Europe is this: because they cut off from Europe and they started buying all of this stuff from us, that gives us more leverage. They gave Trump all the leverage because everything that they cut off from Russia and started buying it from us, that's now leverage. So when Trump says we're going to get a deal, if they don't want to go along with it, he has way more leverage over Europe than he would have had before this war started. He has like total leverage over it because they stopped buying a lot of stuff. And then what does Europe do? If the US drops the sanctions, the European people are going to be screaming, saying, we want cheap energy and we want our sunflower seed oil and the things that they used to get cheaply from Russia, right? If we get rid of sanctions, can the leadership of Russia actually hold on to the sanctions? I don't see how they can.
No, that's a good point. I mean, that's so wild.
And we could just middleman. You know what? We'll be like India does with gas. You know, Trump would be happy to do that if they say, well, we'll keep the sanctions. And Trump will say, no problem. We're going to buy sunflower seed oil from Russia, and we'd be happy to sell it to you, Europe. You know, they'll then take advantage of Europe, and they'll do to Europe what India was, and they'll just bypass. They say, don't worry. We wouldn't want you to buy that nasty Russian sunflower seed oil. We'll buy it and stamp Green Giant or something on it. We'll sell it to you.
I mean, that's what Saudi Arabia and India was doing. Effectively buying gas from Russia, selling it back to Europe. And those stupid idiots was paying like a 5-point markup on Russian gas. Like, think of how stupid that is, right? Like, this goes to the whole fantasy thing that these people were living in. They decided, okay, we're passing sanctions on Russia, so we're not buying that dirty Russian oil. Okay, fair enough. We will buy Indian oil. And it's like, okay, well, where's India getting it from? Russia. So it's like, okay, so you stupid idiots are paying 5 times more for the same energy. Okay, this is ridiculous. And you know, It's like there's a reason why many of these right-wing parties are winning in Europe. My ex, I was talking to my ex-girlfriend yesterday. She's Austrian.
Mhm.
And she pointed out, she was like, these stupid right-wing parties, they're going to win. And I said, well, maybe they should win. And she says they spent 10 minutes fighting, saying that the Muslims were coming after Schnitzel. These
Not
people
the
are idiots.
schnitzels.
Right. They're coming after Schnitzel. And I said, but the same guy who says that the Muslims are coming after Schnitzels are also the same people saying, why are we in this war? Why are we paying this much money? Why are we, at odds with Russia like this? Why are we, meaning they might be nuts on some stuff, but they're making enough sense in a way that affects their public. Meaning if you if I can accept somebody who may be nuts on some stuff if what they're saying is right for my wallet. And I think a lot of people could. It's like, okay, this guy's nuts. However, these other people are also nuts, and they're taking us to a war. They're taking us into more conflict. They're costing me more money. Our businesses are going belly up. Immigration is going through the roof. Like, if you, as a liberal, take a position that goes against the best interests of your public, you can't be shocked that a lane opens for lunatics to open a lane saying, hey, those liberals, I know they try to feel your pain, but they're costing you more money. So it's not shocking that Marie Le Pen gets numbers in France, or it's not shocking that the ADP gets numbers in Germany. These just so happen to be the people who are pointing a finger at the way liberals are behaving. That's not just in America, that's in Europe. So it's like, if you're Germany and your auto industry is going belly up, you feel some kind of way about that. And if the only party is saying something, the Nazi party, as they want to call it, then the Nazi party is going to get votes because that Nazi party is talking about stuff that affects our wallet. The same thing is true in the US. The same thing is true in Europe. So look, I got to be honest with you. I've been shocked that they have been this weak in lieu of what is in the best interest of their populations. I mean, keep in mind, initially they weren't going to have gas sanctions because they couldn't afford it. They weren't going to, shut off Nord Stream because they can't afford it. Well, hell, you didn't have to worry about shutting off. They blew the thing up. Like, every red line that they drew because it was against their interests to draw it, they still crossed it. So, look, as I pointed out on my show, I love what Trump is doing on this. I will take great issue with what he's doing if he's going after Medicaid or shutting down government workers and firing all of these people. Yeah, I take great issue with that. From the standpoint of hundreds of thousands of people are losing their lives for no reason, it should stop. That is God's work. And as you pointed out, this is not faith in Trump. Trump seems to be trying to accomplish his campaign objectives. This was one of the main centerpieces of that objective. And the fact that he's framing his language in the sense of we wouldn't have tolerated NATO being on our border if we were Russia. Okay, that's huge. This was Joe Biden's fault because NATO was always a red line, even going back before Putin was in office, and Joe Biden kept pushing it. Okay, again, that's big. That's showing culpability of the previous president in regards to starting a war. He's setting a framework and a context in which he's talking about it that would allow him to make moves on it far beyond anything that the Biden White House, or for that matter, Europeans would have accepted. And as I pointed out, they don't get a part in this choice. I don't care what Europe thinks.
Yeah, that's my point. And here's the other part about it. Okay, if I'm going to call you unhinged, if I'm going to say the AFD or whatever their party I don't like is unhinged, the right-wing party, okay, I'm going to say they're unhinged. They're the Nazi party. Meanwhile, I'm sending tanks to guys who are goose-stepping around with Hitler tattoos all over. Yeah, but they're the Nazis. You know what I mean? I am aligned with people who are proud, self-professed Banderite Nazis who openly practice Nazism, who walk around with the iconography of the Third Reich, who name streets after Stepan Bandera and have memorials to Nazi SS people all over their country. And I'm going to say those guys are Nazis, right? Number one. Number two, WIIFM, what's in it for me, right? I have to vote for a party. Look, the people are doing it. What is it? When you do the balance sheet, you know what I mean? They're doing what you get or what assets, liabilities, balance sheet. If I vote for this party, they don't call themselves right wing, but I'm not going to have any gas. I'm going to get laid off because my factories are going to close. And if I put anything that they don't like on Twitter, somebody's going to knock on my door and lock me up. But those are the good guys. If I vote for these people, they won't hassle me because they're not into censorship on Twitter. They're going to open the gas back up, and then I'll be able to have a job and feed my family. It is pretty logical from a practical perspective that I don't care what you call the AFD. I'm trying to eat. I got 3.5 kids in a minivan, and I got to feed them and put gas and keep my house. I live in Germany. It's cold, all that kind of stuff. I'm making a simple, practical, political decision, right? I know black guys who voted for Trump who says, I don't like Trump, can't stand him. Why are you voting for Trump? Well, people tell me this. Well, when he was in office, it was cheaper. And things, I don't like the way things are. I'm just going to give him a shot. It was just a simple, practical decision. They didn't like Trump. They didn't expect him to come in and do all the things they wanted him to do. But it was a practical decision to say, you know, the last 4 years have been bad for me. The prices of gas, the prices of rent, everything's going up. It wasn't as bad as him. I'll give him a shot. People in politics make practical decisions. And I don't care how ideologically you spin that this party is good or that party's the good or these are the bad guys. I can leave with my, quote, values if I got money. If I can't feed my family, my values go out the window and the decisions become more practical and less about morals.
So true. It's an economic choice, right? It's like, how do I feed my kids? Like, and that's, God, man, Hakeem Jeffries, he was having a conversation with John. I don't know if you saw the conversation with Jon Stewart. Jon Stewart asked him about a New Deal. He said, does the Democratic Party have
their own Project 2025? That's what he
exactly. And said that it seems that you guys have gotten away from the New Deal. And Jeffries was like, yeah, we need to make people feel good. And it's like, dude, what do you mean you need to make people feel good? You make them feel good by doing materially or things that materially matter. And what I mean by materially matter is effectively, are people bills going to go down? Like, you know, they can use this diversity stuff all they want in regards to their political arguments. But what people often vote on is the economy stupid. It's, you know, are my eggs cheaper? Is the chicken cheaper? Is my car note cheaper? Is my house note cheaper? Is the bills when I send my kid to college cheaper? If you deal with those, you deal with your medical bills, you will get those people votes. It's that straightforward. And they went on this, you know, this Ukraine project, just that had nothing at all to do with the American public. And Joe Biden wed himself to that. Like, I mean, like super glued himself to that issue, even though the American public got nothing out of it at all. Even the arguments that they were making, like, well, our weapons manufacturers are getting a lot of money, so you guys should be okay with it. It's only Ukrainians that are dying. And you're like, wait, did you really just say that? Like, that it's only the Ukrainians that are dying, so you shouldn't feel that much about it, and the money is coming back to our weapons manufacturers. I don't work for a weapons manufacturer, you know, just for that. And on top of it, there's something morally disgusting about that argument that they're only Ukrainians dying, they're not Americans. These are human beings that are being slaughtered, and they're being slaughtered for stupid reasons. I kept saying, one day, somebody is going to ask, what was this for? And I would be super fucking curious to hear the answer of what it was for. Because, like, there might have been 1 million people dead. Let's go conservative numbers, 500,000 Ukrainians dead. Maybe 100,000 Russians dead. We're talking about more than 500,000 people that have effectively lost their lives. And you ask, what was it for? A, you lost. B, you spent, what, $500 billion, maybe more, to do it. Like, how do you sell this to the American public as opposed to, we're going to make your bills cheaper. We're going to make sure you get healthcare. We're going to make sure you get education. We're going to ensure that minimum wage goes up. By the way, Trump is going to do none of that. Right. None of it. However, at the very least, he's stopping people from being shot in the face. So, you know, Jeffries is embarrassment. And it shows that they have, like, God, man, I want to get your take on this. The way this is flipped. Like in the old days, lefties used to hate wars. Lefties used to want to cut the military budget. Lefties used to believe in free speech. Lefties used to believe in healthcare, education, increasing the minimum wage. I remember the speech that Ted Kennedy gave where he is screaming, how much greed is enough? Where he's like screaming, talking about trying to get a $2 increase in the minimum wage. They don't see how the sand has shifted. They don't seem to see how the sand has shifted. This is a pro-war party that decided that Liz Cheney was the good standard bearer for what it means to be a Democrat and ran around the country with her in pushing that angle. So it's super bizarre that these things are flipped on its head like that. We're in the middle of this kind of polarity shift. Correct me if I'm wrong. Do you see any awareness, any recognition, anything within that party to get across how they are screwing the pooch on this stuff? I haven't seen it.
It's not even a political party to me. It's just like this brainwashed cult,
Yeah.
right? The things that they believe are very cult-like. Like I see Democrats who can't even, we didn't lose, Trump stole it. And I'm like, I literally last week, I got to do a show at 6:00 and it's just on WPFW and DC. And last week I said, I'm a Commanders fan. They lost to the Eagles 55-23. I said, how would I look saying the ref stole it? I said, This is my team. I had a great year. I had a lot of fun. They lost 55-23. It would not be, it wouldn't be sensible to say the ref stole it by 35 points. You know what I mean? No, come on. Right. I said, you lost every single swing state. All 7 swing states, you lost all of them.
Yep.
But I still hear Democrats saying yes, Elon Musk did something on Twitter and he did something with it. And I'm like,
this is too stupid.
Unhinged. Let me add something to it. Let me throw this at you. Notwithstanding their issues on Gaza that you and I are not happy with, and a lot of people aren't. If they run a team of RFK Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, that's a winning combination. We may not be happy with them on Gaza, but those two people can win. They're smart. They look good. They're sensible. If you listen to them in a debate, they're smart. We may have issues with them on some area. There's nobody you're not. But if you look at what the Democrats are putting forward, these clowns like Kamala Harris, I mean, gosh, what kind of an idiot was she, right? You saw that 60 Minutes piece.
Yes.
It was bizarre, a word. But the point being, you put this fool out, and I look at people who are popular, not just popular. We want to steal Republican votes. Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. steal Republican votes. If the Democratic Party had said, we're going with RFK Jr. and Tulsi and pushed them and pumped them, I ain't saying they would have won, but they would have had a hell of a fight, and that's a winning combination. But guess what? They ran them the hell out of the party. And now they're in another party, and they are in power, and you can't stand them. You run people out of the party who are sensible, who are pretty smart people. Look, there's nobody I agree with on everything. I'm just saying people that would have a chance to win. There's no place for him in this party. And then Hakeem Jeffries come and they ask him, what do you think? And he's just got this dumbfounded, well, we got to make people feel good.
Yeah.
You ain't doing too good of a job of that, buddy.
RFK could have won this election if he would have been able to run in an actual primary in the race. I take great issue with RFK and his position because his campaign made no sense, right? It's like, I believe I'm an anti-war candidate. But for the standpoint of Gaza, Israel can do whatever it wants. Yeah. It's a contradiction in terms, right? So fair enough. And Tulsi Gabbard is also this kind of Zionist message. But they run these people out the party and then say, oh my God, we don't have these people. So Joe Rogan, who's a Democrat, a Bernie crat. Yeah. You have Elon Musk, who is a Democrat. And then they're like, oh, we need our own Elon Musk and our own Joe Rogan. You had your Elon Musk and Joe Rogan. They were named Joe Rogan and Elon Musk. And you get Gabbard, where the entire Democratic machine has turned on her to try to destroy her. And she is still there, not just still there, in the position of power as the director of national intelligence in the president's ear. So again, all of these were failures, across the board. So I agree with you.
And you tell me Donald Trump's a dumbass. That's what they'll say. He's an idiot. He's a moron. He's the stupidest person ever. Well, wait a minute. He went over to your team and picked, your 2 first-round draft choices. Mm-hmm. He signed them as free agents. He put them on his team, and then he blew your doors off. Yep. How stupid are you? If you're telling me he's stupid, but he was smart enough to look at the talent on your team and say, oh crap, you don't want them. But it's like Trump looked at it like anybody would say, you mean to tell me like his father was RFK and his uncle was JFK and you don't want him? Okay, thanks. I'll take him.
Yep.
And you're like, but it's it's an ideology thing. They didn't want him, but they wanted Liz Cheney. They didn't want her.
That is mind blowing. Like that is mind blowing when you really think about that. A Kennedy ends up going to the Republican Party, and by the way, he gets what he wants. He wanted the files to be released, and he wanted to be able to deal with childhood illnesses. As somebody who had a childhood illness, I applaud that. I mean, the amount of money that we spend in health and human services, and we get less outcomes for it. I mean, we think of the money that we spend on healthcare.
How about this poisons and pesticides and food, things that people don't normally. And I know a lot of people that are like, yeah, that's an issue, those kinds of things. You know what I mean? And you got somebody that says, here's the other part of it. I'm not, people call you a Trump fan. I just tell the truth. Joe Biden came in and he made these promises and they said, you're going to do it, Joe Biden. And he says, I'm sorry, the Senate parliamentarian is just too powerful. I'm the president of the United States, but I've been overruled by the Senate parliamentarian. Okay.
By the way, somebody who's not even elected, somebody that is hired. And as I think I was having a debate with Malik on this, because I pointed out to Malik, under George Bush, they fired the parliamentarian when the parliamentarian wasn't toeing what George Bush wanted to do. They got rid of him. So this idea that, the parliamentarian is such a Goliath, there's nothing we can do about it, is nonsense.
And
Trump comes, or her ass.
And then Trump comes in, and let's be honest, you may not like some of the things he's doing, but he's doing the things he said he was going to do. Whether you like them or not, it ain't. Some of the things I absolutely hate, but I'll say this. The man said, RFK Jr., you support me, and I'll give you whatever it is. He supported him. He brought his people. They voted for him. RFK Jr., you get HHS. And then he goes, Tulsi Gabbard, you support me and I'll give you a good spot, right? And then what does he do? He then he didn't ask Congress. He bullied them. He went to the ones in Congress that didn't want to vote, and he bullied them. And everybody knows that. They were like, "Oh, I talked to Donald Trump on the phone, and all looks good." You know what that was like with Donald Trump. He bullied. He beat the hell out of them, right? He made them an offer they couldn't refuse. But here's the thing: he kept his word, whether you like it or not. And all the Democrats, all these, we're going to do something about student loans. We're going to have a public option. They didn't keep their word on one single thing. Trump's been there like 3 weeks, and he's kept his word on everything. Things that I wish he hadn't kept his word on.
I pointed out that
people going to vote for the guy that keeps their word, the party that keeps their word. Even if you don't, that's what people going to vote for.
I pointed out to somebody, it's like FDR. And I don't mean it in regards to exactly what he's trying to get accomplished, but the level of activity that Trump is engaged in. And I mean, for my take, I want a president to do that. Like, meaning if an executive is running and the executive is like, I'm going to do X, Y, Z. Okay. I want you to do what you said you're going to do. And I don't want these false promises. Oh, I'm going to increase minimum wage $15 an hour. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to pass, I'm legalize marijuana. And then the guy gets in and they have zero concern, care, or movement on those issues. And instead starts a stupid war that gets hundreds of thousands of people killed. Yeah, Trump on this first day was sitting there for like hours signing executive orders. Okay, I may not like those orders, but I like the fact that the president takes it seriously. They're like, I'm going to accomplish my agenda. I'm going to do what I said I was going to do. And he even said so. He says, I'm going to define my presidency by whether or not I fulfill my presidential promises. Okay, like you said, I'm not going to like all those. But is there a proof of concept in a president doing it? And meaning, Obama could have did this. Joe Biden could have did this. Somebody else could have did this. Like this notion of Democrats where they're like, oh, we don't have any power in this process. I find that to be nonsense. Trump is a proof of concept, whether you like him or not, in regards to international and domestic order. And whether it's the executive orders, whether it's him taking power, him firing workers, it's him taking power. It's a test of whether or not the president even have the power to do it, but he is doing it. Congress is not getting involved in the process. And as you pointed out, bullying Congress to get what he wants. That is a proof of concept that it can be done. And so for all of this, oh my God, Democrats didn't have any power, they couldn't pull it off. Okay, fair enough. Just keep in mind though, but this guy is showing you that if you were motivated, you could do a hell of a lot more than what they were doing. It's fascinating to watch. It's just fascinating.
Well, you made a good point, and that is do something. They could have did something. And
Yeah.
once they got in, here's the way it came across. We lied to you. We told you what you wanted to hear so we could get power. And
Yep.
now that we're in power, we're going to stand up to Putin. We're going to stand up to North Korea. We're going to stand up to Iran. We're going to promote democracy. We have an agenda, and we're going to promise you anything we need to promise you. And once we get in, we're going to execute our agenda. There's no chance that you're going to get anything you want. We got nothing but excuses for that. And then 4 years from now, we're going to run again, and we're going to say, but we're even better now. Why? Well, fair enough. We might not have done anything, but we've got a black female, a diverse group of people running, and you got to vote for her or you're a jerk because you didn't vote for a diverse female. And Trump is a bad guy because they were so much into, we know we can win.
Mm-hmm.
Because we hate Trump so bad that we know everybody hates Trump. Like they were so blinded by their hate for Trump that they thought everybody has to hate Trump as much as we do. And then, let's face it, you can't talk about this without talking about the lawfare.
Yes.
It was this lawfare. And I'm a big believer in this. It legitimized Trump in that people looked at Trump and they had to say, man, the neocons really hate this guy. And ultimately, it came down to this. The people that I hate, these criminal, warmongering bastards, really hate him. He must be the right guy. I believe that all of the charges and the 90-some charges and calling him a felon and all that kind of stuff, and, made him look like the people's hero. It really did.
It came across like they were going after him. I mean, it really did, especially the New York case. New York case was the one that was the most illuminating to me.
Yes.
Hillary Clinton paid money, called it a legal expense, and used that money in order to buy a dossier that was stovepiped into the FBI and the CIA in order to go after Donald Trump. Some of the reporting that has been coming out is showing that U.S. aid might have also been diverted in a way that could assist also with them doing that, effectively trying to prosecute him. Then they turn around and say, okay, well, Donald Trump paid hush money to a porn star. And because he paid hush money to a porn star, and called it a legal expense, that we can now prosecute him as a felon. And it's like, well, wait a minute. Clinton did the exact same thing. It may not have been a hush money to a porn star, but it was in order to buy something that she called the legal expense. There was no criminal filings against Clinton over that. They charged her a fine and they called it a day. When Donald Trump was in court and they tried to get the FEC to explain why it was not a crime, the judge was like, you don't make that determination. We're going to prosecute you as if you are a felon. When the same thing was applied to Clinton, no such dice. I saw that and was like, okay, this is absurd. This is absurd. And I remember being
What about the other one? What about the other one in New York? The other one in New York, where basically I'll just to give an example, I'm going to use a number. He's getting a loan against the building for, I'm just using a number of $1 million.
Right.
So Trump says, well, it's worth 1.5 million. The bank lends him 1.5 million, right? I'm just using a number, but lends him more than it's actually worth. But he pays the money back in full. The banks comes in and says, we got our money back. We sent him a loan. He paid. Everybody was made whole. If we had to do it again,
we do it again.
Loan him again, right? And I'm thinking, well, wait a minute. Just to be honest, just like the porn star, I'm like this: an even swap ain't no swindle. I understand the game. He's a rich and powerful man. He sees a beautiful porn star, and he's like, "Hey, you and me, we can do this. I got a pocket full of money." She's already doing that for a living. She's a porn star, right? She's a porn star. That's when she gets paid. He says, "Let's do this." She does it. Here's some cash. Keep your mouth shut. She takes her hand. Look. That's between him and Melania, right?
No harm, no foul, right?
It's not my business. He's rich, and she did what she was doing to get that. They're adults. They're consenting adults,
right?
I don't think it's right to get involved. That's between him and his wife. If Melania slaps him in the head, whatever. But let's face it. She married a rich guy. She knew what she was getting married. You know the game. She married a billionaire or whatever. She knows the game. She ain't naive in New York. But so you take a transaction that in the real world you look at it and like, okay, he paid 130 grand to a porn star. Okay, little, yeah, that's up to them, right? Then you look at the next and you're like, wait a minute. He made a loan. If I'm selling my house and I'm like, what do you want for your house, Garland? Well, it's worth $100,000. I want 101. Should I go to jail if somebody will give me 101? If I take a second loan against my house and my house worth $10 and I say to the bank, give me 15, if they'll lend me the 15, and then I
by
take
the way,
the loan back and the bank is like, we knew what it was worth, but we don't care. I should
and
be
right there,
prosecuted.
the bank does due diligence when they're doing loans like that. So it's
Yes.
not like he just tells the bank a number, the bank runs with the number. The bank also goes out in order to evaluate how much whatever that thing is worth. So the bank did what they did. They went, they analyzed it, they came back with a number. We're going to give you the loan. Trump paid off the loan. So it's like, okay, so where's the issue? And as you pointed out, the bank points out, yes, we will do business with him again. Why wouldn't we? He paid back the money. So like
Because
when
you
the
know, a
public
bank
sees,
and a bank takes other things into consideration. For instance, the bank may look at it and say, look, for instance, I bought a vehicle one time, and the vehicle was hard to find. At the time, it was $30,000 or whatever. And the bank said, well, no, for this vehicle, we rated it 28. So we would only lend you 28, but we look at your credit. Your credit is good. You got 7 something credit. So they said, look, we would normally not lend that amount for that truck because our value, is that it's worth a little less than that. But your credit is good. You have other loans with us that are on auto pay. Tell you what we'll do. If you put this loan on auto pay, we'll give you the loan. So the bank is saying the same thing. We know that this piece of collateral is not as much as the loan you're taking out, but you got good credit. You've paid us off. You got paying us other things on auto pay. What is it? It's a risk that the bank is taking. And they're saying the risk is low because you pay your bills. That's all the bank did. They didn't care how much it was worth. If they looked at Trump, they said, hey, the man paid us back before. Yeah, lend him his money.
Yeah, but
and now the Democrats will try to throw him in jail for that and call it a felony.
They tried to criminalize it, and so that's what I mean, right? It's like the American public looks at that and says, "Okay, are you guys serious right now? Are you serious?" I mean, don't get me wrong. Democrats were on board for it. They thought it was great. They didn't see an issue with it at all. I think being honest, though, is looking at it saying, "Well, wait a minute. How are you trying to prosecute this guy for something you wouldn't prosecute Hillary Clinton for?" Or how are you trying to prosecute this guy for something that the bank is okay with? The bank is not screaming fraud. They are. I mean, like, it's just astonishing to me. They're out of their minds. They're out of their minds. And at some point, they need to come to some kind of assessment of, okay, well, what do you represent? What do you stand for? Because that's the thing that I think, well, I can speak for myself. That's what I care about. When someone says, does it mean to be a Democrat? You need to be able to answer that. And I got to be honest, I don't think they can today. At the very least, with that answer, if they're being honest, it's not going to be this party of FDR that it used to be. It's going to be something else.
And then here's what's terrible. The USAID thing. This comes out and you look at it and you're like, wow, they're sending money. We knew what it was already.
Yeah.
And so when they go in and they say, we're going to stop it, 90% of all of the so-called independent media in Ukraine is funded by them. And we know that's a regime change machine, right? And now the Democrats are pissed. I'm like, that's what, and they're out in front of USAID. Oh, this is terrible. We've got to, and I'm like,
they're protesting this nonsense. That's it. That's what they're out there protesting. Think about that. Like, it's pointed out in very clear terms, this is a regime change, the CIA cutout. That's what it is. And Democrats have decided that they need to spend their time fighting for it. And it's like, you people are idiots. You people are idiots. I don't doubt that they give a chicken wing to a random person in Africa or some random country.
Sure.
But let's be clear, the bulk of this money is used as a CIA front in order to knock over governments that we don't particularly like and to propagandize to and get the groundwork for potential color revolutions. That's what it is. National Endowment for Democracy, same thing. So, it's like, oh my God, we're taking away this one chicken wing from somebody. Okay, fair enough. I get that. It is a worse outcome, though, for the number of people whose lives are ruined or who end up in a war, like in Ukraine. Again, 9 out of 10 were coming out of our State Department, out of our tax money. So, yeah, and I guess that goes back to my original point. This notion of the slippery sand in the way that things have moved under their feet, where they are fundamentally different than what they were and they don't seem to know it, either there's a level of self-righteousness that doesn't allow them to see it. I don't know what it is. They are fundamentally different, as you point out, a cultish organization that doesn't necessarily seem to function like a party. Parties have values. These guys are just purely relative to whatever Trump is. So,
Now, let me ask you a question, something that hasn't been discussed, but I think in the context of what's happening in Ukraine has to be discussed. Taiwan. If you're like an independence, this member of this independence party that was aligned with the neocons that were saying, oh, America's going to protect us from China, knowing that you're going to get blown to smithereens and all of that, you got to be looking like a real idiot right now with what's going on in Ukraine. You got to be feeling like a real dummy if you're in Taiwan. Yes, let's get more weapons from the U.S. We've got to stand up to China. You got to be looking around like, yeah, I guess the cat's kind of out of the bag here, ain't it?
I don't know who would have been that stupid to go to war with China. Like, we're talking about 1.5 billion people. We're talking about an industrial base that it surpasses the United States going back to the Second World War. This is not like Taiwan is like a tiny island. Like, so the idea that, the U.S. is going to protect you from any kind of war with China was always nonsense. It was always nonsense. Even though Joe Biden would say, we believe in the one China principle, and talking out the other side of his mouth, and we will militarily defend Taiwan. Okay, that's like militarily defending Hawaii, right? Like, it doesn't really make sense. If you indeed accept the one China policy, then Taiwan is part of China. You can't have it both ways. This goes to this whole hypocrisy stuff that takes place in Europe, where they say we believe in democracy while overthrowing Romania by keeping out Karl Gagescu. So I don't know what's going on with that party. I don't know, like, I found myself having easier conversations with Republicans than Democrats, weirdly enough, or let's say Trump supporters than Democrats. It's weird. It's very strange. It seems to be a polarity shift that's taking place. So I guess we're riding this boat.
And here's the other thing. Think about this. A couple weeks ago, it was, we've got to get more weapons in Taiwan so we can protect them, and they're independent, and China and blah, blah, and they need democracy and all that, right? And then Trump comes in and they're like, what do you think about Taiwan? And Trump's like, yeah, we're sick of giving them all of this free stuff. We're putting tariffs on them. And now he's like,
and that's the rub. It was never free.
Like, we're going to talk about, actually rubbing salt in the wound. Not only are we not sending, he's like, we're tired of sending them all these free stuff. They're a bunch of damn freeloaders. We're putting tariffs on them.
It wasn't free. That's the rub. Like, Taiwan was paying more for those weapons than what they would typically sell for. So they were like coming out of their pockets hand over fist for that stuff. Like, it was more expensive. So it's a slap in the face for Trump to be like, oh, they're taking advantage of us, these freeloaders. It's wild, man. I would say this though, it's a safer world under those terms. At least I think it is. I mean, under these kind of guidelines of, we are not trying to overthrow governments. We're not trying to be at each other's throats with a knife. If we can come to some kind of terms as the world, we would do so. I hope he does. I legit hope he does.
Another thing, and that is J.D. Vance took a shot at Ukraine, right? Because I had gone to the Russian embassy recently, and this guy had made this movie. It was like an hour long about the oppression of the Russian Orthodox Church in Ukraine. And they did the usual things, like they sent some Ukrainian guy into one of these one of the Banderites into this church where people worship, and he's pushing and all that, and people had to kind of constrain him, and he got on. You saw that, and they had to get him out of the church because he's trying to raise hell, right? It was a false flag. They then show the video all on TV all over Ukraine and say, these Russian Orthodox are beating up our poor men in uniform, and it was all, they sent him in here to raise hell, and when they trying to get him off the floor and escort him out, then they say they beat him up, and they go and they close like 500 Russian Orthodox churches. And then it comes back that it came from Washington, that basically the Biden Blinken people were like, yeah, these churches are a little too close to Russia. They're Russian Orthodox. They've only been Russian Orthodox for like 500 years, but that's not important now. We need to shut them down. They're beating up priests. They're all black and bloody. They're some are missing. They're putting a house arrest with collars on their feet and all that. Okay. But J.D. Vance, when he does his talk, says, yes, and we think it's wrong. They're discriminating against Christians in church. Tucker Carlson talked about that, right? And I'm like, man, he's throwing shade. He's throwing
Yes.
shade at Zelensky. So I don't see how Zelensky gets out of this alive. I think the Banderites are going or on his tail, if you know what I mean.
He better take a lot of that money and go into Florida somewhere. That's going to be his way out. And did Ritter say that? I think Ritter said that too, that Zelensky is not long for this world if this keeps up. We will see. I mean, obviously, Trump wants elections. Zelensky is doing everything in his power to avoid them. So I think this is going to be over their heads. I think in the same way that Biden was able to push Zelensky into the war. I mean, if you remember, during the Istanbul agreements, they had the tenets, the premise of a deal, or let's say the contours of a deal. It was Boris Johnson jumping in, effectively killing it. But Boris Johnson was doing it representing the West. Hundreds of thousands of people dead later. Here we are. I guess I'm pointing, Zelensky wanted to end it. He didn't have the power to do so because at that point he wasn't speaking for himself. So I get the sense that if he wasn't speaking for himself then, is he really going to be speaking for himself now if Trump decides this is over with? We're done. We're finished.
So one other thing, with the USAID and all of this, the whole regime change apparatus, they just defunded the National Endowments for Democracy. And so one person was telling me, don't worry, Garland, they're just going to fire it back up. And I'm like, wait a minute. Do you think anybody is going to accept that if you're in another country and they say, hey, guess what? We're getting the game back together and we're going to get another NGO to overthrow your country. Don't you want to be a part of it? Countries are going to be, no. The people in the countries are going to be, the last time you guys had a bunch of NGOs and when you stopped funding them and everybody found out that they were U.S. funded, they took these guys out and shot them or they threw them in jail for the rest of their life. Nobody's going to go into that again. You can come into countries with money and people are going to be, last time you did that, you walked away and you left everybody holding the bag. Nobody in these countries are going to join that game. If you try to rebuild that apparatus, any trust that you'll support them, that you'll keep them going, any of that is gone. You will not be able to rebuild that apparatus, even if you want to, because nobody's going to buy it. You got people in the Philippines and South Korea and all over the place looking around saying, oh, no, I'm not going to get a paycheck. And everybody's going to be saying, wait a minute. We thought your NGO was legitimate. And as soon as the U.S., you're a fraud the whole time. So how are you going to rebuild that?
So it sounds like, going back to what Rubio is saying, meaning whether they can or not, put to the side whether they can rebuild it. It does sound like what Rubio's main complaint is that it wasn't functioning under government. Like it was just kind of doing its own thing. And so it was always having a very specific direction of regime change and that type of stuff that was completely disconnected to what the administration wanted. So it sounds like what Rubio wants it is to be under the State Department. Meaning he wants the NED, he wants the USAID, he wants that stuff to be functioning as American policy. Now, will he use it in similar ways in South America? Meaning, because under Trump, USAID was used to also try to overthrow Maduro.
They tried.
Yes, they tried. So, and under Obama, they were using it to try to overthrow the Cuban government by having this kind of Twitter that the United States was effectively controlling, putting out stories and whatnot in order to go after the government. Meaning, it's possible that what Trump wants is it to be under let's say the bona fides of the government. Bona fide is the wrong word for it, but under the control of the government and to be a backup to government policy as opposed to just kind of we're overthrowing governments that don't support liberal, quote unquote, in the way that they're saying it, values. Maybe illiberal is probably better since they're literally overthrowing governments and calling it liberal. But I think your point is right. How do you do that when you have just hit that hammer so hard, pointing out this is a regime change process, or this is what they use for color revolutions? It's not like other countries don't get our media, especially other world leaders. Certainly they can see that the conversation in the U.S. is that USAID is a CIA front to knock over governments. So it's like, how do you, after...
And think about this. And in their countries, they're all suddenly exposed. It's like, oh, the Center for Democracy and blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden the lights are out and their website's down. Why? Well, we don't have any money to pay people anymore. And everybody's like, And everybody in these countries, all they got to do is look around and see who's shut down, who doesn't have any money, whose websites closed down, who turned out the light and put the flag down on the way out because they're closed. And everybody will know which were these USAID operations, because they're the ones that will be instantly defunded. They can't
good point.
They can't hide it.
Good point. You look around and say, okay, who just went belly up? And the person who went belly up is the people who are working for USA or NED. Oh, that's such a good point. That's such a good point. You can't hide it at that point. But that's just it, though. They weren't hiding it. Like they were proudly with the banner USAID on the door. I think the thing that they were hiding was what USAID was doing in their country. And the fact that that's been now exposed. Yeah. How do you,
some of them were, because remember what happened in Georgia and Nicaragua. Both countries tried to pass a law, and the law was going to say, it's like FARA, you have to tell us what money you're getting from outside of the country. And when Georgia and Nicaragua tried to do that, they went bananas, because they knew that there was a lot of organizations that were like working on stuff that were claiming to be media and claiming to be other things. And they knew if that law passed, by law, they were going to have to admit, oh no, we're not just getting donations from friendly people who think they want democracy or open media. A whole bunch of our money's coming from USAID. So there were a lot of organizations that were hiding it, and that's why they had to fight FARA laws in any other country. But now they can't, because all you got to do is sit back and just watch the lights go out, watch the websites go down. And these countries, their intelligence agencies are looking, they went down. They went down. They're going to go pick those people up. They're going to interrogate them. They're screwed. Nobody ever wants a piece of that. They are some of them in some countries, the unthinkable. Let's face it, around the world. Look, think about the United States. If suddenly they found out that you were working for that clandestinely, you were putting people together.
Oh, you're going to jail. You're going to jail. They're going to throw you in a cage if that's the case. I mean, think of what they tried to do with Ritter. Right? Like, were they literally going after the guy, talking about you're some kind of plant because you're giving a take? Or the Uhuru, what is it? The Uhuru,
exactly.
Yeah. I mean, like, if they found out that you were getting money from a foreign source that was not outed and that you didn't say anything about, and they can prove to any degree that that stuff was a cutout for intel, you're going to jail. You're going to jail.
Good. And like you said, they just made stuff up. The Huru 3, just because they stood up and said, we don't agree with the Ukraine stuff. Oh, there you go. You got it. They tried to put them in jail for that. And came up with some cockamamie thing. And there are countries where, their legal system is a little more rough around the edges. And when they find you that, they ain't going through all that, buddy. They're taking you out somewhere and you will never be heard from again. And though I'm against it, that's the reality.
Yeah, Oscar didn't show back up to work the next day. Yeah, it's wild, man. It's a lot going on.
Oh my gosh. And there's things that I'm furious about, but I don't know what the hell's going on with Gaza. Last thing, I got about 5 minutes, because as I've said now, when people are like, Trump said this, I said, I will not react to what Trump says. Trump, hey, well, if Russia doesn't do this, then we'll throw all of these sanctions on people. Like, oh my God. A week later, Trump's like, what do you want, Russia? Let's get this deal. You know what I mean? Hey, we're going to send people went bananas. Yes, I think it's going to be beautiful. We'll send them all out of Gaza and we'll make it beautiful. Everyone's like, oh, he's really eject all of the Palestinians. And at this point, I'm like, well, all of the Islamic states come together and say, yeah, there's no way they're going to do that. They'll overthrow our governments and kill us. So that's not going to happen. I've come to a point. I don't know what the hell he's going to do in the Middle East. One thing I can tell you, Trump's not going to do. Whatever he tweeted on Truth Social last week, that ain't it.
Yeah, Egypt is saying no. Jordan, Egypt didn't even show up when he was out there talking to King Abdullah. Both are effectively saying no, this is not happening. The people who I talk to, they point out that they don't think it could happen. Like the integrity of the state itself would suffer if they allowed Donald Trump to do that. And either Jordan or, for that matter, Egypt. Trump has leverage because of the money that he gives those governments. But that leverage may not be enough if the integrity of the state is going to be at stake. So I agree with you. I am trying to not entirely react to everything that comes out of his mouth as opposed to what he does. Nobody knows what's happening in Gaza. I've spoken to people over the course of the last several weeks.
Tomorrow was supposed to be something, but then I heard that
They made agreements.
They said they were
The
going
deal
to
was
get
back
rid of
on.
because people were like, "Oh, they're going back to war." And I said, "You know what? If they go back now, it's Trump's. Trump ain't gonna let that happen." I said, I don't believe. Oh, yeah, Saturday. I'm like, nah, I don't think under Trump now he stopped it. And the people that he worked for and worked with have bigger fish to fry. I don't think they're gonna let that Gaza war start
I don't think
again.
he
It's
wants
too much
it.
trouble.
Yeah, I don't think he wants.
Trouble. Yeah.
I think he wants to be able to bask in this glow of I got a ceasefire. And like you said, if it goes back to a war where they're killing each other, okay. I mean, Israel is still killing people. I mean,
Yeah.
they kill like 100 and some people over the
Oh,
course
it's
of the
terrible
week.
in the world, but what's going on in the West Bank and all is terrible.
Yeah.
But the Gaza thing would be his. That if
Yes.
it started again, you know.
Yes.
And you got to say this: not a Trump fan on all this stuff. If Trump is able to get, he's turned the volume down on the conflict. They're still doing terrible things in the West Bank. If he can get that shut down, and he stops the war in Ukraine. If somebody says who should get the Nobel Peace Prize and the Nobel Prize, we already know that's a fraud too, but you know what I'm saying?
It would be easy, Trump.
You'd have to
Especially if he's going to be, having these peace talks with China and Russia simultaneously. I mean, he's talking about world peace. If you're talking about the major powers of the world coming together in order to, I don't want to say divvy up the world,
but even have a discussion about peace based on where we've been the last 4 years.
Exactly.
Even to say, let's bring the world powers together to talk peace.
Yes, that's a positive. And it should be accepted as such, regardless of what else he does. That's the way I look at it.
I certainly agree. Well, look, I got to get running because I got to do PFW in a few minutes. God only knows. But it's interesting because on there in DC, I remember a couple when I used to get beaten senselessly every week as a Russian agent, a Russian bot, a Trump lover, anything because I'm like not a Democrat, and you know how we are.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't believe in Russiagate. Oh, you're a Russian agent, all that kind of stuff. And so many people have come around. They're like, yeah, I'm kind of with you. Now, every now and then I get somebody, but you could see that the election was going to be different because so many people, so many callers were calling and they were like, they weren't happy with the direction things, just like anecdotally.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you could see it amongst people you knew. I still have friends and family members that are diehard Democrats, but there was people that I knew and I was starting to see a sea change out there where people were just like unhappy with the way things are.
Even blacks. I'm saying even just because African Americans, vote predominantly Democrat. Yeah. No, I agree with you, man. I agree with you. Be safe.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, thanks a lot, everybody. Yep. Everybody, don't forget, if you are on Jamarl's channel and you're not subscribed to my channel, come over to mine. If you're on mine and you're not subscribed to Jamarl's, go over to Jamarl's, everybody. Jamarl does have a great I'm telling you, it should have a lot more numbers. We know how YouTube does people like us, who are trying to push back against warmongers and the status quo. But he's got a fantastic morning show, and he's got Scott Ritter on there and KJ No and all, a lot of really, really good people. So check out his morning show. It's Monday through Friday. What is it, 7 to 10?
7 to 10 early.
I watch it every morning. I watch it like if I'm doing whatever, I'm riding out to get caught, whatever I have. I mean, it's the best to be.
It's an early morning to do politics. It's like hardcore politics
every morning.
7 a.m. Yeah.
It really is. So everybody, make sure you check that out. Subscribe, smash the old like button, and of course, you see everything scrolling across the bottom. Buy me a coffee, Patreon, whatever. If you can afford to, both people who are watching both of our channels, if you can afford to donate and keep the channel healthy, please do that. If not, just make sure you share it on all your social media platforms. Thanks a lot. All right.
That was great. You, my man, be